People that quit their job in a hilarious fashion, how did you do it? 1992. I was 19 and working at the most pissant radio station imaginable, Am Country Gold. The notoriously cheap, abusive, and dishonest owner, a fella named Wes, had just screwed me out of a promised bonus. It was the latest in a long line of dishonest acts, and I'd had enough. The rest of the sales team was afraid to stand up to Wes, and he screamed abuse at them constantly, except the lone woman who he harassed. They were all in their 30 and 40, working the same garbage job I was, but desperately needed it. I did not. So I engaged in a very public shouting match with Wes in the lobby, saying all the things everyone there had always wanted to say. Then I swept the contents of the front desk onto the floor and stormed out. Instead of leaving, I went around the side of the building to a payphone and called the radio station request line. In a fake southern accent, I said, "Hey y'all, I just told my cheap, no-good, lying piece of human garbage boss to go to hell. Play me out with, take this job and shove it, and dedicate it to my former boss, Wes." The disc jockey had no idea what had just happened in the lobby, or that my Wes was the Wes. So he enthusiastically played my recorded dedication and added, "This one is for you, Wes. Choke on it, you sack of crap." The building had speakers inside and out constantly playing the radio feed, so I got to hear Wes get clowned by his own radio station before driving off into the sunset. Story 2. I used to work for a telecommunications company. My mom was very sick over the last 3 months of her life, so I had to go home most weekends to see her. It's a 6-hour journey to get from where I worked to the town where I'm from. When her birthday came around, I requested a couple of days off that I had saved for this specific occasion. Yet, the days off were denied because we were approaching a busy time of year for sales. At this point, I hadn't mentioned what was happening at home because, well, I was always taught that you keep your work and personal lives separate. But I said it to my boss, who at the time I saw as a pretty compassionate person. She never took any issue when I got sick or was late for whatever reason. But when I told her, she just looked at me point blank and said, "I don't want to hear this." After that meeting, I went back to my desk and sat there for about 20 minutes, thinking of a solution. That solution was to get my things and just leave. I said goodbye to my friends on my way out, flipped my boss off, and just walked out. I went straight to my car and drove back to my hometown that night. It was the best decision I ever made. I got to spend all my time with my mom before she went. We even got to go on a vacation and spend one last week away together because I had the time to do so. I'll never ever regret walking out that day. Not exactly hilarious, but I had a good chuckle to myself on that drive home. The look on my boss's face will never leave me. It was sweet. Story 3. I used to work at a place that rhymes with Pizza Hut, and the managers there were real cheapskates. There was this nice old man that would come in every Sunday and order a triple extra cheese pizza, and while they charged him for the 3x cheese, they would forbid us from ever actually putting that much cheese on a pizza, because apparently cheese in the pizza selling world is akin to gold. So instead of 3x extra cheese, he would really be getting what the instructions would qualify as barely enough for a regular cheese pizza. On the day my 2 weeks notice ended, the old guy just happened to be my last order. So I went into the walk-in and grabbed an entire box of cheese, proceeded to dump the entire thing onto his pizza, and tossed it into oven. It was stacked so high that it couldn't even fit into it, and half of it was SCD off. Anyways, the look on the old guy's face when he saw me do this made it all worth it. Imagine pure excitement. Needless to say, I didn't put the correct phone number down for future job references. Story 4. I used to work for my father. It was probably the worst time of my life. He treated me like absolute crap, paid me very poorly, and made me work 70+ hours a week. I was young, just out of high school, and I complained about my predicament quite a lot. His response was always, "If you don't like it, there's the door." 6 months before I quit, he made me run his night shift, which meant 6 p.m., 6:30 a.m. Monday through Saturday. I was very unhappy about this, so I applied for another job. I got it and went to my father's office with a list of demands. He responded with his usual reply. So I said, "All right, I've gotten a job offer somewhere else. Duck you, I quit." The look on his face was priceless. He truly believed that because I had amazing job security that I'd be willing to put up with anything and that I'd stay there for my entire career. In one short, sweet instant, I proved to him that this was not the case, and he lost his most valuable employee. The icing on the cake was the fact that the job that I left him for is at the company that manufactures the very machinery and software he relies on in business. So anytime something goes wrong in his factory, he has to call me to fix it for him. Story 5. Worked as a teller at a bank for a few years. GM and supervisor were both kind of crappy in their own ways. My buddy there was also a teller who felt similarly and wanted to get out. We started applying to places and both got interviews at the same company. As luck would have it, we both got hired and got phone calls about 10 minutes apart. There was only one other teller aside from us, and when it got busy, supervisor usually had to jump in as well and usually hated it. It felt like we were constantly short-staffed, and days when one person would call out sick or be on vacation would suck. Being down 2 people was the worst. Naturally, when we both got hired, it became a race to see who could turn in their 2 weeks' notice first. He printed his off and raced into GM's office, walking out with a big smile. GM calls me in and offers me full-time hours after I had been requesting them for months. I jumped in saying, "Let me stop you right there. I'm also turning in my 2 weeks' notice." Remembering that look of disbelief will make me smile every time. A solid professional FU is just as enjoyable to me as going out with a bang. Story 6. A guy from my work years ago came in high, and the boss figured it out. She brought him into the office to fire him, and with a cop to escort him out. For his final stand, he came real close to her face and said, "In a world of darkness, where you carried the only light, I still wouldn't follow you," and left. Story 7. My boss was had me on a disciplinary for something that wasn't my fault and had my bonus taken off me. So I found a new job, threw out 2,500 pounds worth of stock as technically the food hadn't been stored away correctly, went above my boss and got head office's backing, then handed my notice in, knowing that I ducked his bonus up to duck that guy. Story 8. I knew someone who worked in a really crappy call center. His boss never had time for anyone. When he went to tell his boss that he was leaving, the boss waved him out of the room as he was on a call. So he wrote "I quit" on a post-it note, stuck it on the boss's screen, and just walked out. That's story 9. I was working for Argos as a Christmas job while studying. After a while, it was becoming too much as I had to stay in work until deliveries were unpacked. This meant that some days I was leaving for college at 8:30 a.m. and not getting home until 1 a.m. that night. One night, it was a particularly large delivery, and it was getting very late with no end in sight. I decided I'd had enough and told the supervisor I was finished, didn't want to do the job anymore, and wanted to go home. He rejected this and said that I was going nowhere until the delivery was unpacked. I stood in front of him and repeated that I quit, therefore, I don't care about the delivery. Completing my studies was more important to me than earning a bit of extra cash. He still said I was going nowhere and refused to unlock the door to let me out. Despite feeling I had a case for false imprisonment, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I ran out the fire escape door and down the street, never to return. I'll always remember the sound of the fire escape door making a big doong as it hit the metal railings, and I made my escape to freedom. Story 10. Hey boss man, sorry I haven't been to work the last 2 days. I'm helping my fiance plan for our wedding. Anyway, I wanted to let you know I found a new job with the state, so I'll be starting there in 2 weeks, basically when I get back from my honeymoon. Yeah, the timing's great, right? Anyway, I need to give my 2 weeks notice. Also, we're really getting into crunch time right now with this wedding planning, and she really needs my help. I need to take the rest of this week off. Also, I think I might have forgotten to reserve the time, and I'm sorry for that, but I need to take next week off for the honeymoon. So, yeah. So you're giving me your 2 weeks notice 2 days late and telling me you won't be in for the last 2 weeks? Yay? I guess so. Can you think of a reason why I shouldn't fire you right now? Well, because you'd have to call corporate and have them cut me a check and ship it out today? Sigh. Fine. Have a great wedding. My wife, meanwhile, skips 2 days at her crappy call center. The HR manager calls asking if she's okay. I'm not sure. I think I'm having a vision problem. A vision problem? Oh no. Are you okay? What kind of vision problem? I just can't see myself ever going to work there ever again. Story 11. I worked at Home Outfitters when I was 17, worked cash 1 day per week, and stocked shelves, cleaned up the mess of the back room a few other times during the week. Now, when I say mess, imagine everything you need to clean the place, plus overstock, plus using the ducking cardboard crusher as a storage unit. This back room was a mess. Anyway, one of my cash days, I rang up a discount wrong, ended up charging a guy $72 for his purchase rather than $85. Boss yelled at me, told me I was going to pay for it and that he was going to be speaking to the manager about possibly letting me go. There was his mistake. I was working this job as extra cash. I didn't need the money. First thing I did in the 4 hours I had left for this shift, I relabeled the entire vacuum and kitchen sections wrong. I'm saying wrong names, pricing, stock codes, everything. 2 hours left, I called the province's workplace safety board and emailed them over 20 photos from my phone on problems in the back room on the floor. I then turned off all the cash registers, minus the one being used, right before the 7 o'clock rush. These things were ancient. They took about 20 minutes to boot up. I then asked to see my manager for a moment. He approached me at the front where I said the following, "Good luck with the labor board. I'm out of here." It was the best moment of my life at the time, but in hindsight, I should have just left. Funniest part of this whole ordeal was a friend who worked there as well. Man mentioned that it took them all 4 or 5 hours after closing to relabel everything. The machines shorted out when they tried to boot them all, and the next day they were shut down for 48 hours to get their backroom sorted. Manager got fired by corporate. The assistant manager who yelled at me quit because of the pressure. And for my cherry on top, they had mentioned at orientation in writing that if you had first aid courses, you got 25C more per hour. I worked a total of 300 plus hours for this place. I emailed my first aid course that I had through being a part-time Army reservist to corporate, and they sent me a check in the mail for the 25C per hour. $75 said it was a lot to 17-year-old me now that I reread this, and I was a bit of a banana at that time. Story 12. Someone at my previous workplace, a huge grocery store in a large mall, went to the PA system we used to issue messages to the whole mall and said something along the lines of, "Dear customers, managers, and coworkers, I ducking quit," and then proceeded to leave. Story 13. I wrote a respectful letter thanking them for the opportunity and all they've taught me. The first letter of every sentence spelled out duck boss. Nobody noticed. Story 14. Wrote a normal letter of resignation before I got in the shower one morning. NBD. Got into the office and was straight ignored by management. Oh well, told you when my last day was. Fast forward 3 days, they pull me into a conference room to ask what it would take to keep me. I say nothing, but don't want to ruin them. Solid manager for a staff of 70. And would be willing to consult part-time. They liked that idea and said they'd be willing to pay me my current hourly as a consultant. I was prepared for this and told them that wasn't what I said. I said that I would consult, and my consulting rate was $200. They were flabbergasted and insulted. I was making about $18 an hour salary. They thought it was insane, even though they'd pay a consulting firm $600 HR when I was on vacation. Needless to say, having planned to quit it was no skin off my back and laughed about it. They didn't take kindly to me laughing about their anger and told me to pack my crap. I did so, got an extra 10 days vacation paid out of it. Story 15, worked at Arby's. When I planned to quit, I typed up a formal letter of resignation and put it in an envelope. I walked in and handed my boss the envelope, and she said, "Are you quitting?" I stammered, "No," as I walked backwards out the door and booked it out of there. I wasn't very good with confrontation back then. Story 16. It's the middle of the lunch rush at the restaurant. It's a gorgeous day, but the porch is closed, so myself and this poor middle-aged waitress are taking everyone who expected to sit outside into our room. We're providing crap service because usually there are 5 servers for this many people, not 2. I asked the manager if she wouldn't mind calling people in to open up the porch, which is where all of these people are expecting to sit. She goes off on me. "Are you ducking kidding me?" I exclaim. "You just swore at a manager. You're fired." I was going to be back at college in 2 weeks, so I really didn't give a duck. The thing is, she had to cash me out first. So for those 10 minutes, I quietly cussed her out in front of everyone until she started screaming her head off in the middle of the restaurant. She was fired a couple weeks later. Story 17. I worked for a law firm doing research and analysis. I wrote a custom program on my own time that would automate editing down these huge lists we'd get from an outside vendor, boiling it down to only what we wanted. First, only my team used the code. By the time I left, over 150 people were using it. Sounds minimal, but it was a huge time saver. The program would boil down a list 100 pages long down to about 10 pages, a process we used to do manually a couple times a day. A layoff was announced. I was part of the outplacement, but the firm wanted to continue using my program. I asked if there would be compensation as it was coded on my own time, never paid for it, etc. I was told no, and besides, there's really nothing keeping us from still using it when you're gone. For the remainder of my time, 2 years, I would create patches whenever the format of the data changed. With my last patch, I put in code that would disable the program and erase key parts of the program 1 month after my last day. From what I understand from people still with the firm, on day X, everyone came in, booted their machines, and the program was simply gone. Efficiency fell through the floor, delaying opening cases, billing clients, etc. I wanted 10K. They lost more than that in the first week without the program. Some have stated I might have been in a position to sue for compensation instead. This was a huge law firm, billed in the hundreds of millions a year, had thousands of very talented attorneys. I could have sued, sure, but they could have made it so expensive for me. Dragged it out so long, it would have cost me way too much in the long run. Story 18. My boss was never in the office and wasn't even there but for me to turn in my resignation. So I took a video of me dancing on his desk and singing about how he's never there and sent it to his boss. Story 19. I had a part-time student job in college as music director in a small church. Everything was fine until they hired a new minister who preached long, annoying sermons in which he either condemned gay people or talked about the evils of birth control. I finally couldn't stand it anymore and told him, as I handed in my 2-week notice, that his 1-hour harangues reached the point where the ear can absorb only as much as the rear can endure. Story 20. A little after high school, I worked in a fish market attached to a full restaurant. We had a couple of small bar tables by the market restaurant shared entrance. I didn't like working there very much because It was a fairly crafty place to work, but I was good at the job and their go-to guy for closing shifts, doing inventory, etc. The job of the opening morning crew was to fillet fish for the day and prep king crab leg portions for dinner. Morning is pretty much dead, so the morning shift is way easier. The job of the night closing crew was to clean, devein, and peel several thousand shrimp of multiple sizes in time for dinner. This shift was much harder because we had steady business from 4 p.m. onward with a rush from 10, but all of your duties still needed to be completed. I came in for the night crew around 2 p.m. on a Saturday, the last day of the pay period. I discovered the morning crew did duck all during their shift and was still ducking around until far 4 when they left. I spoke with the manager and he said, "Unbelievable. I'll have a talk with them, and when the second night crew guy gets here at 7, you can get cleaned up and be a host." This was a sweet deal because we almost never got tips in the market, and the hosts got tipped out by servers. I agreed to his terms. I finished filleting the fish, then did about 100 portions of king crab legs. Finished with the morning crew's work. I did about 2,000 shrimp and noticed it was 7:15. I looked in front of the market and saw Oscar, the second night crew guy, seating people. He looked right at me and smiled like a cheeky little Karen. I went to the manager and he said, "Oh, Oscar's fresh, so we're just gonna have him be the host and you can close up tonight. I'll sign off on your OT." That's when I realized Oscar was wearing a nice long-sleeve button-down shirt and not the crafty polo they had the market guys wear. This meant the manager called him and told him to dress for the host role that night. What the duck? This was not the agreement. I didn't want to do any OT. I was supposed to be out at 10:30 and we closed at 1 a.m. Around 7 is when the place really started to get busy, so I popped back in front to run the market. Some friends of mine showed up asking when I got off because they were going to the movies. I told them to go find out what was playing and what the times were. Since I was the only one doing transactions and filling market orders, clam chowder, shrimp cocktails, fish and chips, raw fish orders, the line was building until it hit about 10 people in line. My friends came back and said the movie started in 45 minutes. The theater was in the same parking lot, so getting there would be easy. I said, "Give me 30 minutes. Get me a ticket and someone meet me in front so the rest can get us seats." For the next 15 minutes, I worked at about quarter speed. The line hit well over 20 people. The food was not great, but for some reason, people were stubborn. I clocked out on the register and walked out from behind the counter. To the next person in line, I said, "I have to clean this table and somebody will be right with you." I walked right out of the door and threw my apron in the trash. I went to my car to swap shirts, threw on a hat, and walked back by the restaurant. Oscar had to put on an apron over his nice shirt and slacks to start filling fish orders in the market, and people were yelling at him about the wait. I laughed and went to the movies. That movie was death to Smoochie, and it holds a special place in my heart to this very day. Epilogue. I came home with my friends to a bunch of voicemails from the manager. I told them the story and they were laughing as we listened to the messages a few times. "Captain King Champion? Where the duck are you? Captain King Champion, you better get your ass back here. Captain King Champion, you are fired, pal." "Thanks for nothing," I called in the next Thursday and got the manager who ducked me over on the phone. I said, "This is Captain King Champion. When can I pick up my last check?" "Wait, you mean Captain King Champion who left in the middle of his shift? Captain King Champion? Yeah, you can come get it today. I have something I'd like to say to you." "Okay, see you in a couple hours." I went in about 30 minutes later and the hostess on duty was my friend. I told her I was there to get my check and she said, "Oh, I can get it for you. I'll be right back." She walked into the manager's office and grabbed my check for me. I left with my check and he didn't get to have his final rant at me for quitting after he ducked me over for the last time. Epilogue's Story 21. First job when I was 15 for a discount clothing brand store. Head manager was the aunt of our store manager who was 9. Our store manager did nothing most of the time and used to chat to her boyfriend and friends loudly on the store phone, much to the annoyance of everybody. One night, it's come closing. We are grabbing our coats and getting ready to leave after a really busy day, and the store manager storms in, telling us how she's lowered the shutters and won't let us leave until we have helped her finish the one job she had all day to do because her aunt is doing a surprise inspection in the morning. Everyone is pissed, ESP the people who have had to watch her do literally nothing all day. She turns spiteful, threatening to delay our pays, dock our wages, etc., etc. All bullcrap. For one woman, it was the last straw. She had a kid to pick up from a club, so she waited till she left us alone to work, walked up to the shutters, and pulled them up manually by hand. All of us crawled out to freedom. We left her a note saying, "Good luck explaining to your aunt why 4 people just quit." Story 22, first job. Boss was a douche that liked to harass the girls. Most girls were my friends. Got screamed at for something I didn't do, proceeded to climb on roof, dropped trow and pissed from roof onto his brand new Mustang. I hope you're reading this. Duck you, Dave. Story 23, I worked for a Midas garage. One week we got a new service manager, and up until that point, we always inspected, estimated, and sold our own jobs. This new guy wanted to inspect the cars and then check the estimates. Early on a Saturday morning, a girl in her 20s with a baby came into the shop and said her brakes were making noise. I took the ticket, test drove the car, and then pulled it in the shop and then inspected the car. I found the LR brake shoe had gone metal to metal. I mic'd the drum. It was okay. Wheel cylinders and springs, hardware all okay. I estimated the ticket. It came out about $150 to fix the car. I went to the new service manager and handed him the estimate. He went and looked at the car. He didn't even take 30 seconds, and he said I needed to add wheel cylinders, hardware kit, and 2 drums to the estimate. I told him all the parts he wanted to replace were okay. He said, "Do it." I just shrugged my shoulders and walked away. He went back to service desk. I walked into a completely crowded waiting area, stood in the middle and the room, and proceeded to tell everyone in the room what the new service manager wanted me to do. I turned around and went to go get my truck to load my toolbox and leave. The service manager tried to stop me from loading my box on my truck. At the time, about 5 customers came out and helped me lift the box into the truck, and then started screaming at the service manager. They all wanted their cars put back together and taken off the lifts. It got so bad, one customer called the cops, the service manager called the owner. The cops and the owner showed up. I was putting the girls' wheels back on. The owner came over to talk to me. I told him what happened and what I did. The owner went over to the service manager, who was surrounded by all the pissed off customers, and fired him. I decided at that point I was still going to quit because the owner was just acting. He told that service manager to do it. At that point, a few other techs were packing their crap up too. As I was walking up my 2 truck to leave, the girl walked up to me and thanked me. She asked if I knew another shop that could fix her car. I decided I would fix it myself. So we went to the parts store, got the parts, went to my house, and redid the brakes. Not to make this whole story even longer, that was in 1989. We've been married for 24 years now. That service manager couldn't get a job at any shop around. I still see him every once in a while, gathering up the grocery carts at Heb Story 24. So I have 6 years of experience as camp counselor. This summer, I tried a new camp I never went or heard of before. I was too late to decide if I'd come back to my old camp, so they hired someone else. It's okay, my fault. But anyway, that new camp, I knew at the pre-camp week that it would not work out for me. The 2 bosses, M and F, were gits. They were always talking like we were stupid and we did not know how to do our job right. We were a team of 30-ish counselors, and of course they were micromanaging everything. But I needed the money, so I kept my mouth shut. During the summer, I lived a lot of frustrating situations, like one of my boss caring about other counselors in front of the team meeting when those counselors are not there. Or the same boss making bad fingers in front of the children, giving me orders and telling me I don't have to ask any question. E-seat. But it was never personal. Except for this time. It's week 8. One counselor already quit out of frustration. One was fired. They are understaffed. It's a pretty hot day, so I call every pool near the camp center. One pool have room for my kids, so I went to tell my boss, M, that I'm going to the pool today, even if I didn't tell sooner. Because, you know, it's like ducking 104 degrees out there. He began to tell me, cynical, that I never do things like everybody, and that I should have told him 2 weeks before, so he could have made the reservation. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, man. Next time, I'll be sure to do it. I just want to go to the pool with the poor kids, so I don't make a big deal of his arrogance and micromanagement. It's funny because I always said this procedure of reservation was mostly to help us and don't put stress on our shoulders, but I see now it's because they don't trust us. Anyway, I asked if I still can go to the pool. He said, yes, what can I do? You already made your reservation. So I went with my day. Reservation was only at 1 p.m. The kids have their bath suits and sun cream. I arrived at the pool and tell my camp name. They said they have a special message for me because my boss, M, called before I arrived. The pool staff told me that my boss didn't want them to accept me. They were uncomfortable with this. I was shocked. So I asked my colleague, we are 2 with the group, to take the kids and do a game or something while I handle this situation. I called my boss, F, because they were splitting their shifts, and she was the one in charge during afternoons. I explained the situation with a very calm tone. I'm still surprised at my self-control during all this day. She was very cold and told me it was something between M and me. She then pointed out that pool reservations are supposed to be done 2 weeks in advance. After that unpleasant call, I took the little paper on which the pool staff had written the message for my boss, M. The idiot let his personal phone number. So I call M and it was his voicemail. Here's the exact message I let on his phone. Hey, M, it's Banjo. I'm at the Pelican pool right now and they told me you let a message forbidding them to allow me at the pool. Well, you could have told me before I went that you didn't want me to go. It's pretty unprofessional and immature from your part. You are penalizing the kids, not me. For my 6 years experience as a camp counselor and a DAFA former, I never knew a camp so poorly run as yours. Pause. Stuck your stupid camp in your ass, I quit. This last sentence slipped out of my mouth unwanted. I closed my phone and started to laugh. I had never sent someone to hell like that. So I told my coworker. We went to the pool anyway. I spent an hour with the kids telling them I was leaving. It was heartbreaking. I went back to the camp center. 2 days after that, they sent me an email. They asked me if it was really my decision to quit. I sent them a very nice letter, professional but cold, stating the reasons I was leaving and encouraging them to be nicer with their staff. So, here it is. Sorry, I'm late to the party and my main language isn't English. It's French. I'm from Quebec, Canada. I was working at a big city camp, not in a place where kids sleep on camp, but more as a day camp. Cheers. Story 25. I wrote my 2-week notice on a condolence card that said, I can't comprehend the depth of your loss. Saw someone else do it online, ordered my own, and held on to it until a better job offer came along. It went over well. Story 26. Wow. A question that applies to me. My story actually occurred yesterday. I work for a small landscaping company. It was literally me, my boss, and a coworker. It's important to, not that I'm also in the DEP program to head to Navy boot camp in February. My boss had always been a general hole, making half jokes about how he was just losing money by employing us and how we were just causing him undue stress, or talking crap about every past employer or employee of his, and making extremely judgmental comments about everyone he came into contact with. Tuesday, I realized that we would be mowing on Wednesday, and typically that means that we get back late. I had a mandatory Navy meeting I need to be at. He told me it was no big deal because he had family stuff he needed to back for. Yesterday at about 12:30, I checked to make sure that we were still going to be back by 3 or 3:30 so I could attend my meeting. He replies, nah, I pushed back my stuff so we don't have to be back by 4:30. I would miss 3/4 of the meeting by being back that late. So I reminded him about my meeting. He shrugged and told me, and I quote, well, it sucks for you. Tell them your boss is an a-hole. I had turned in my 2-week notice the Friday before last, so as of yesterday, I only had 2 days left working for him. I proceeded to have my dad meet us at the next yard we mowed. Boss told me to get back in the mowing truck, and I said no. I told him that if he wouldn't allow me to prioritize my mandatory meetings over the job that I had 2 days left at, I wouldn't prioritize his schedule. I told him to text me on Friday for when I can pick up my paycheck and left. Story 27. Worked in the cinema as a teenager. Came in late for work after they changed my schedule during my days off and didn't think to mention it to me. Boss lost it and started shouting at me. As far as I'm concerned, if you need to shout, I ain't listening. So let her rant away for a good 15 mins while I was at my locker clearing it out. When it finally clicked that I wasn't listening or getting ready to work, she stopped and asked what I'm doing. I said, going to see Lauder with the lads who've just finished, as I'm doing nothing else with my evening, may go for a pint after. What's your plans? Story 28. I used to work at a retail store during my time in college. The only reason I did this was I already had a job lined up that would pay $1 more per hour. This was also during the seasonal time where we had a lot of new people working on the floors with very little training. I was working on one side of the aisle and the new employee was on the other side. They were struggling with something. I can't remember what exactly it was, but I go over and start helping her, show her how to do it properly. And our real Karen of a boss comes down the aisle and starts yelling at me that we need to stop fraternizing and get back to work. I turn around, look her in the eyes and tell her, maybe if you learn to actually train people instead of screwing around in your office, I wouldn't need to be helping her with stuff. She should have learned the first day. She retorts back, if you talk to me like that, some more, there will be problems. I tell her that there is a problem you now have to close with one less ducking person, as I had her my gear and walk out the front door. In all, it was a good decision because I got an extra 2 weeks off before I started on my new job that I could use to work on my solution to a case competition, which ultimately led to my career after college. Story 29. I got this. I worked for the US Air Force. Long story short, every other week, my work schedule changed by 10 hours. I worked 12-hour days plus several weekends, no lunch break, and barely a bathroom break. I was an aircraft maintainer and mission essential, so they are allowed to do this to us. I am telling my boss my enlistment is up in a few months and I have 2 months worth of leave I need to take, so I just want him to know. Even throw him an email to remind him and give him an idea for dates. Every time I bring it up in person, he just tells me to shut up. So my dates are a week away. Almost my entire squadron leave for a business trip, leaving a very small amount of people to fix the jets. And I'm pretty much the only good one. I just look at my boss and say, hey, I need to start leave in 3 days. I've sent you and the commander the approval, so I guess this is goodbye maybe. And he says, who says I have to accept it? You don't have to use up all your leave before your enlistment. I reply that I have worked my ass off harder than anyone in my situation, and that yes, he does in fact have to accept it. If he doesn't, I'll route it to the commander. I end up routing it to the commander, a very brave thing for someone my rank, and he accepts it and sends me an awesome email saying he pretty much thought I was amazing and I deserve every second of it. Also to make sure I come in and say goodbye personally. I just walk into my boss's office, smile as him holding up the printed email, and he says, "Duck you," and I leave. It wasn't actually as unfriendly as he sounded. He was actually a really nice guy, just a real crafty situation. I'd just been abused for way too long, and he was the one that had to deal with my rebuke. They survived without me anyway. The Air Force has much bigger problems if they can't survive without one person. Story 30. I used to work in invoicing. My boss was a massive micromanaging Karen, the type that has literally nothing better to do than nitpick because they, for some reason, think that that's how you properly manage. This went on for about 2 years before I'd had it. I took a big old dump in the one bathroom in our office, total of about 6 people that worked there. Precariously placed my boss's business card on the massive log, and then left it there in the toilet before going to her desk and quitting right then and there. She tried to come back at me with some spiteful crap, but I shut her down, telling her that she's a crap boss, and she's the sole reason that I'm quitting this job. Best day ever. Best dump ever too, now that I think of it. Story 31. I worked overnights at a gas station through college. After being scheduled to work my 3rd Christmas in a row, on Christmas morning, I gave my boss a card that said, "I quit." Story 32. Worked in a video store, when there was such a thing. My coworker showed up very, very high. He was also about 6'3" and 140 pounds, so he stood out in a crowd to begin with. Anyway, he came in for a 4-hour shift, stood in the middle of our bank of checkout registers, and just ate chips. Like 6 bags of chips back to back, and he ate them slow and savored the crap out of each bite. The whole time he had zero facial expression. Think of the dull stare of a chewing dairy cow. After about 3 hours, he calmly turns to me and says, "I can't do this anymore." Gently sets down his bag of chips and walks out the door. We never saw him in the store again. Story 33. When I was in high school, I worked for Best Buy as a cashier. I wasn't respected as an employee and found a better opportunity at another company. So I went to work in my pajamas on Black Friday, and my boss looked at me in shock and said, "You need to change. You can't come to work looking like this." I then told her I was leaving and only came to get my paycheck. I wish I can express the look on her face and everyone else that was working that day. It was such a feeling of relief. It also was funny showing up in my pajamas, ha ha ha. Story 34. At 16, I worked at a Dairy Queen brazier in Texas. My manager was a git. One night, I sliced a good chunk of my thumb off because they did not have the proper safety equipment. After being out of work for 3 weeks, I returned to work. My thumb was still pretty screwed up, but I was trying. My manager kept riding my ass, telling me I had to move faster. I was the only short order cook. When I saw 3 Greyhound buses pull up, I knew I was in trouble. She came back into the kitchen and said, if I didn't move fast for these buses, she'd find someone who would. That was the last straw. I knew no one in the entire restaurant could cook, so I took her up on her threat and simply walked out the back door. She flipped me off as I drove away. My friends told me they hardly got any orders out and the buses left since they couldn't get the food out. I felt bad for the people on the buses, but was sick of being berated by management. Story 35. Not my story, but one a coworker told me. The guy who it turned out I had replaced knew he was going to be fired and wanted to quit ahead of time in style. So he enlisted the help of the guy who told the story and spent the entire day fashioning a suit of Spartan armor out of cardboard boxes in the back. Then, right as they were closing, because he was still a decent guy and didn't want to make a scene, he donned his armor, walked up to the Atone manager, saluted with his cardboard sword, and with a straight face asked, "Permission to leave your employment to go on campaign, sir?" Without waiting for a reply, he saluted again and walked out. I would have thought some details were embellished, but the guy showed me the video. Story 36. Looking back, the actual reason I quit was incredibly petty, but it was almost 2 years of repressed frustration with this particular manager. I worked at a Saltine Bucket that was #1 in sales in the district and one of the top performing stores in the country. We got a new GM, and he promptly ran the store into the ground and treated his staff and customers like crap in the process. I was getting increasingly frustrated with the lack of respect from him and just general inability to do his job, which made my job really difficult. By this point, I was only working 2 days a week at this job as I had found another serving job and was working both. This day, I was working 8 to 2 at job 1 and then 4:11 at job 2. The 2 jobs had similar dress codes, but I made a minor mistake in getting ready that day. I forgot to put in my solid plugs into my ears, as opposed to my still solid but semi-see-through material plugs. I literally forgot to change my earrings before going to work. Normally, this would be a, "Hey, disclaimer necessary. Those aren't dress code. Don't wear them again, Kay." But no, Bob McBoblob was really feeling his Napoleon complex today and needed to flex. So he decides that with it being our Sunday morning church breakfast rush, with over 60 names on the wait list, that the only logical thing is to send me home over earrings, which any other day would have simply been, don't do it again, mistakes happen, yada yada. I was a shift leader, I was a skill trainer, I was pretty high in the pecking order and kept things running smoothly, and you're gonna send me home for the whole day because of earrings? Not. Go home and change them. It was nope, you're done for the day. So the logical thing for me to do was to dress him down in front of a dining room full of shocked guests about what a crafty manager he is, how this store's failure is his fault, and how he's the biggest douche-ducker I've ever met in my entire life. I said the word douche-ducker 4 times, yelling it. I end the rant with, have a good day, sir. Go duck yourself. He starts to follow me out of the store, asking me to reconsider staying, and I stop dead in my tracks, whip around, and yell, I said good day, sir. Ayla Jean Wilder, and promptly walked out to never look back. Edit to add, Bob was fired from Saltine Bucket Corporate less than a year later, after taking the store from number 1 in the district out of roughly 100 stores to the very bottom scoring store. Justice. Story 37. 17-year-old me has just finished college and was planning to go to uni. I had a job in Tops Tiles. This was my first job, so I usually got all the overtime, as I wanted to impress. The manager was a sleazy gay guy who would try to hit on me as he knew it made me uncomfortable. I had an open day for the uni I wanted to go to, him being the banana head. He has decided to book me in for a day shift all day, despite me booking the day off for the open day. He said that if I didn't turn up for work that day, he would cut my hours. I thought I'd wait until the shop shut, scribbled on a piece of paper that I quit my job and posted it through the letterbox. The funny part was that before I left, I locked the bathroom door and took the key with me. No spares were ever cut as the manager thought this was a good idea. Hope he shat his pants. Story 38. I worked at this crafty sandwich shop. Actually, the food was decent. The owners were holes. I'd worked in food service before and had always had aprons provided and washed by the business. They made me wash one that they gave me. It was weird. They were annoyingly cheap. I called and told them I was quitting as I had moved on, didn't give 2 weeks because I knew they'd cut my hours and already had a new job. And they asked for the hat they gave me back. I had worked there a year and I'm kind of sweaty. It was gross and I felt bad for someone else wearing it. So I crap in it, put it in a bag, and just left it on a table during the lunch rush. Told them I dropped it off in the restaurant. Story 39. Not me, but a great story. One guy I worked with hired a mariachi band to follow him into our boss's office. Unfortunately for him, the boss was on vacation, so he ended up quitting over the phone and was so pissed he spent the $300 on the band. Story 40. I was working on a farm for about 14 months, and in the height of the season, I asked for 1 day off a week, to which the boss agreed. Time came where I couldn't have my day off because someone didn't turn up. Then the following week, it was, oh, but I need you to get the orders sorted for the morning. So another week went by. The week after that, I got up as usual, and halfway through the day, he says to me, oh, I didn't think you worked next day. I was fuming. The next day, I collapsed in the field, albeit for seconds, and the boss wasn't far away. He asked me some questions, not one of which were, are you okay? Then proceeds to get in his truck and drive off. Well, that was the last ducking straw. I consistently did twice the work of others with no additional pay. So I rang a member of family who came straight out to pick me up, and they told the boss it was a disgrace how he walked off after my collapse, and I'm not staying here any longer. He gave me a week to collect my belongings, which I did within 24 hours and a month on. I'm still jobless and homeless, but I have no regrets leaving, despite the situation I'm in now. T.L. later. Get pissed off with how you're being treated. Get someone else to quit for you. Edit. For a few mistakes, as autocorrect is awful. There could be more, but I'm enjoying myself with friends right now. Story 41. I had landed a job at an IT company that had been struggling the last few years. It was a nightmare scenario, but they were promising the sky and moon, so I decided to take it anyway on a 6-month contract to hire basis. I was there 2 months, and it was a full-on dumpster fire. I won't bore with the details, but after a month, they had so many people quitting, I got moved to the tech support. At first, I was told it was a temp thing. Then, in the all-company meeting, my boss just took a pawn on himself to make it permanent without really asking me. That was the last straw. Within a few days, I had found another gig and went into his office and told him I was taking the rest of the day off. This is how the rest of the conversation went. Boss: okay, Platinum, we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, I don't think I'm coming in tomorrow. Boss: okay, so when do you think you'll me, or the next day after that, or the day after that? Boss: Platinum, what are you saying? Me: well, Jeff, I'm quitting, and this is my last day. Boss: you can't quit. You have a 6-month contract. Me: Jeff, you can certainly try and force me to work here, but you really can't. So I'm leaving now. I started to walk out, and he followed me, yelling at me that I couldn't just quit. I had a contract. He's going to call my recruiter. Then his last attempt to insult me was the best. His last words to me as I exited the building was, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. That was almost 5 years ago. The company went under 8 months after I left, and Jeff is now selling insurance somewhere in Nevada. Story 42. During my exit interview, I told her the real reason I was leaving was due to the quality of the office chairs. I said they were an eyesore, uncomfortable, and made me ashamed to come to work and resulted in subpar job satisfaction. 2 weeks later, I was told by previous coworkers, everyone got brand new, top-of-the-line office chairs. Story 43. Not sure it will be as fun for you as it was for me. Was working in a company that had been exploiting me for a while. Didn't mind it for various reasons, including video games, tax cut, world travel. They needed a project manager for the upcoming huge, and 10 years late in the making, website. As I had a background in there, I volunteered. Had to work with the CEO, a delightful woman, une grosse pute, as we say in French, which would override technical decisions I took after hours of research because a friend of her would have told, it's better. Do I need to say that said friend had no technical background and that we were talking about streaming videos and how to make it cost less? Anyway, took a holiday, and when I got back, we got in a new argument about the search bar position. At some point, I told her that I didn't care as it had no technical impact. To be fair, it's my actual words, but it might have sounded a bit like, do whatever you want, I don't give a crap anyway. Things went downers from there, so I start looking for another job. In the meantime, we were talking about my new contract as I changed position to become a technical project manager. I was not happy with the new contract, so I asked for a meeting with HR to talk about it. I had prepared everything on my contract copy, and we went into a half-hour presentation of everything I wanted removed or changed. Nothing crazy, just aiming for no money loss and removal of abusive parts. At the end, HR tells me that it won't be possible, that I don't understand, so I handed her my resignation. Dumbfounded, she looked at me with a speech around, don't do that. You're not going to leave the company for that. Give me some time. Maybe we can work something out. CEO won't be pleased if you leave the company now. Do you think she's going to agree to my terms? Well, you know her. So I quit. I'd rather be on the street than ever work with her again. Are you serious? Of course not. With a big smile. Oh, you scared me. Oh no, I'm still resigning, but not only because of her, but because I found a great new job with what looked decent and nice people. And they were. Stayed at the new company until I got a new boss that looked terribly like that woman, so I quit it again. Also got contacted by a headhunting firm a few years later, as they were looking for a right-arm man for the company owner. As you can guess, I was intrigued as I didn't know it was even possible to apply to such a position. Long story short, it turns out they were more looking for an assistant than anything else. Took about 3 interviews for them, so spit it out. On the 3rd interview, I went with the spirit to invert the roles and rough them up a bit. Ended up telling them that if they had no question left, I would be leaving now and call them the next day to give them an answer, which of course was no. Still had a lot of fun inverting the roles and being the one asking the kind of questions you get as the applicant usually. Story 44. Worked in a supermarket as the only male cashier. There were 20-odd aisles, and for some reason they already stuck me at like Isley 20. The next nearest cashier to me was in like aisle 8. So when we were dead, all of the other cashiers would be talking at their aisles, while I was left alone to stand in silence at the other end of the store. They said they had to do it because I would be distracting to the other girls my age. SMH. So one day they were like, would you like to run the scan yourself out part of the store, next to aisle 1? It had 8 kiosks for people to check themselves out at, and it was a cake job. Lo and behold, some of the female employees started talking to me, and after about a week, I was called into the manager's office and warned I was distracting people from their work. Me, being 17 and effing livid, decided to quit like a boss. Before my shift, I went and bought a bottle of super glue, like the kind of glue you could use to build an ICBM with, and it would still stay together, re-entering the atmosphere. I then went to all of the kiosks and grabbed the loose change people had left. Standing at my command post on the U-scan, I proceeded to glue change everywhere. On countertops, on the UPC barcode scanner, in the register drawer, anywhere you could think of, there was change super glued in place. I finished my shift and left. The next day, I get a panicked call from my manager. He asked me if I glued change everywhere, and I said yes. He was like, you can keep your job, but you have to get it off of everything ASAP because the head of the company is coming in 2 hours to look at the store. This was a rather large company, like hundreds of stores, so that was a huge deal to my manager. I said, sure, I'll be there in 10 minutes, never actually planning on coming in. A week goes by, and I go to pick up my last check, and there stands my manager, angrily spaced out at the front desk. I said, I grabbed my check and left. One of my former employees ended up telling me the head of the company was livid. Nobody lost their jobs, but now you have to get a key to form a clerk to get super glue off of the shelf. And with all of our local craft stores out of business, they sell a lot of glue. Story 45. I worked as a mechanic at Pep Boys several years ago. While I worked there, some of us discovered that if the drainage pipe in the shop were pressurized, the toilet would shoot water out of the bowl. The service manager at my store was a piece of crap. The day that I quit, I waited until he went into the bathroom to take a dump. I filled up a cheetah, a device used to seat a tire onto a wheel, and released about 200 psi all at once into the drainage pipe. The toiled ducting exploded, the manager screamed, and then comes storming out of the bathroom covered in crap. Story 46. I worked at a Chinese restaurant right out of college. The owner and his sister liked me and let me bend certain rules, like having a beard when others had to be clean-shaven. He treated most employees pretty unfairly and expected them to do way more outside their job description without paying more, like running the Facebook page and Twitter, and would require you pay for any food mistakes or sendbacks out of your tips. Time comes, and I get hired doing marketing for a startup a couple cities away. I tell all my coworkers, and they're all happy for me. I also asked their help in me telling the boss something else. When I gave my 2 weeks, I told him and his sister I was moving to Reno to work with my uncle in deviant asset reacquisition. He asked what that was, so I described a bounty hunter. I'd be chasing people who had warrants for their arrest. It would be dangerous. I'd carry a gun, wear a bulletproof vest. People would run from me and I'd try to take them alive. This is of course all bullcrap, but I got all my coworkers in on it too. So when the owner started to second guess my story, as I knew he would, he'd ask, "Hey, what did Partiana elect to go off to do again?" Every coworker would reply with, "Oh, he's like a bounty hunter now, basically." Brilliant teamwork. Fast forward a couple years, I get another job close to my old restaurant, and I drop in there for lunch with some current coworkers. Good to see some of the old crew again. The boss comes in and sees me. Wants to hear all about my bounty hunting. I'd totally forgotten that I told him that. So on the spot, I come up with 4 crazy adventurous stories about sneaking into a cocktail party to arrest someone and tackling them into a pool. Or the time I arrested a gangbanger, and when his crew showed up, I was alone. I convinced them I had sniper cover, and they backed down. He took it all hook, line, and sinker. It was only then I explained that I moved back for this new job. It was only once he walked away that I was able to give the whole story to my new coworkers. So yeah, I think that qualifies, haha. Story 47, finally. I've been waiting for this get asked. Firstly, my high school nickname was Muff. The manager, reason for quitting, and supervisor, all right lady, came out and the manager asked, "Do you think that's funny?" Me, well, yada, manager. "Just get out of here, Muff. Just get out of here." Me, "Yeah, that's the point, manager. I'm quitting." Manager, "Just get out." Me, "Supervisor, it's been a pleasure working with you." Manager, "You can go duck yourself." Then I left the end. Story 48. I worked as a lifeguard at a few different places since it's a job that's easy to do and easy to get. One of the places I worked at, they scheduled me every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, while the manager's friends got way better hours. So I was pissed. Toss in a few bullcrap rules the manager implemented, I was ready to leave. I asked my dad if his company was hiring, and they were. So I got a new job, and it was time to quit my lifeguarding job. I got in a huge argument with my manager about something, because I was willing to just drop down to part-time and help out. I had a lot of friends who worked there, and I didn't want to leave them hanging. So at the end of my argument, I said, I quit and walked out edit. I had to quickly finish typing because class started. Let me continue. So after that, the manager proceeds to continue yelling at me on front of patrons as I'm walking out. Since I worked at the pool, I got a card for a free membership. After I left, I kept using the free membership to use the pool as a big duck you to the manager. She then revoked my membership. But the pool had a policy that friends and family could enter for free if they were bringing something to an employee. My girlfriend, now wife, was a lifeguard as well. So I used that policy to bring my GF food and ice cream and whatnot. All this stuff really pissed my former manager off. Well, fast forward a month or so, a few other people followed my lead and left as well. This meant they were really understaffed. The manager had the audacity to ask me to come back to fill some slots. During one of my visits, the manager started screaming at me for some random reason, again in front of people. I yelled back at her, listing off all the reason I quit, and then I said, "The only reason I come back is to spite you. Once you leave this job, I'll never come back to this pool and I'll let everyone I know to never come here." A ton of patrons looked at me so confused as to what the duck was going on. The manager got me banned from the pool, but it wasn't really enforced, so I kept going back to visit my GF and swim when the manager was off shift. Story 49. I guess I got a story. Was working at a retail place and my general manager had been transferred to a different store. No problemo, it happens. I met the new gym. She seemed stuck up, but I figured it was probably just nerves as this is her first gym job. We had a list of employees who went to college and had to get certain days/times off. My old GM was always cool with this, as long as we let him know ahead of time. Not the day before school starts. First thing our new GM does is say, "I don't need to honor this crap," rips the list off the wall, and throws it away. Okay, I am already super pissed now. When she leaves, I call all the employees to get the list back, and I change the schedule she made to honor the times people needed off. The next day, I was written up for insubordination, kind of saw this coming, and I quote, being a ducking a hole. This was my second job at this point, so I wasn't stressing too bad. I was kind of planning on exiting soon anyways, but then this happened. I knew a guy who worked there. He always worked hard, never talked crap about the job, was just a pleasant dude to work with. This Karen GM goes off about he's a lazy piece of crap, that he is ugly, and that customers shouldn't be forced to look at his ugly-ass face, that she was planning on firing him. I had enough. I wrote an email to every single person I knew in the company, including all of the employees, detailing how she felt about all of them, what she had said about all of them, her plans on not allowing anyone to go to college. I then placed a sign on the windows for customers to see, detailing how we are treated at that store, and since I was closing alone that night, I just closed up shop and slept in a makeshift bed I made. Next day, I actually came into work. I had written out a resignation letter which only said, "Duck you, Mom," in huge bold letters. She started screaming as soon as I walked in. I told her to shut up and read this. She opened and read it. I laughed and walked out the door. I made sure to continue shopping there as often as I could before I moved from the area. She was eventually demoted and moved to another store of retraining Story 50. I was fired for quitting my very first job. I was 18 and was working at a gas station just down the street from my house. Shortly after I got my job there, I found a better paying job doing tech support in a call center for I know, right? I have my boss at the gas station. 3 weeks notice that I would be leaving for a different job. He was the nicest guy I'd met, but he lost his mind when I said I was leaving. He accused me of just wanting to work there for a paycheck and didn't care about his gas station, and I just wanted free cash register training. WTF. Who needs that, but whatever. He tells me I can't quit because he's firing me, straight out of a bad movie. I say whatever and left and caught the bus home. A couple weeks goes by, and I haven't got my final paycheck yet, which wasn't much, maybe about $125. I called the gas station and he said he wasn't going to mail it to me, and that I had to come in and pick it up myself. So I got a friend to pick me up and drive me down to the station, and my old boss is sitting behind the glass with some smug look on his face when I see it. It's a big bag of change that we used to do money drops at the bank in. He says thanks for ducking up his gas station and accused me of stealing a vanilla Pepsi, if anybody remembers those. My friend and I drive around the corner to count the money to make sure it was all there. And when I open the bag, I finally see what's in it. Pennies. Only pennies. There isn't a single nickel, dime quarter, or loonie. Duck. I had to laugh because at the same time that I was pissed off, I still thought it was a pretty funny thing to do someone, even if that someone was me. It took about 10 minutes to count out $20 in pennies with my buddy, and we drove back around to get some gas. Because the boss never worked the till, he didn't know he'd come back until I went inside with my shirt rolled up full of pennies, which I proceeded to unload onto the counter, with the majority of them spilling over the edge onto the floor. Boss came running out from the back, freaking out and telling me to get out, and I was never allowed back in there. Worth it. Story 51. My wife worked for a certain chain coffee shop a few years back. She got another job, so requested reduced hours. This didn't happen for 3 straight weeks. During that 3rd week, she had a soccer mom from hell try to get her attention by throwing ducking snowballs at her through the drive-through window. My wife then stopped what she was doing and tossed the soccer mom's iced tea at her, which exploded everywhere and slammed the window. 5 minutes later, she had written her letter of resignation with the only things she could find, a purple crayon and a sticky note. Story 52 worked at 2 restaurants, pubs, same owner called Restaurant X and Pub Y, and was bartender. In the 2.5 years I worked there, never called in sick, even when I was using a cane to walk, because I busted my knee playing sports. Cane for 3 months. Anyway, one Saturday morning, I wake up with 102 fever. Try to sleep it off. Wake up again at noon and still not gone. Call the manager of Pub Y to let him know. He says he'll try to get someone to cover. Calls me back and says, Person X is off taking care of his kids. Fair. And Person Y is drunk at a BBQ. Fair. So here I am expecting that he would try to call someone from the other bar to take over. No, he doesn't. His response was, Sorry man, I'm not paid to work overtime. You will need to work. Fine by me. I'm seeing dark crimson red now because of this, and the fever. I drag myself to work in a cab. Tell all the afternoon regulars, 2 RNs that both commented on my appearance, that I have a 102 fever. Clears the pub out completely from 4 to 6. We had over 50 people. 6 p.m., wife comes over to check on me with aspirin for the fever. Manager comes to check also, and wife rips him a new one. He tells her he can't do anything, and I tell her, Don't worry, I got this. Tell him that I'm finishing my shift and not coming back. Keep in mind, I still worked at the other bar. He thanks me for my professionalism. 7 p.m., with me and 2 waitresses on the floor only, I ask the girls to take the bar, go sleep in the nook, cause I'm a zombie at this point. Come midnight, Saturday. House is packed. I mean, about 150 people, and I call last call, Bar usually close at 2 a.m. Sunday morning, sure as I thought, I get a call from the owner, who usually checks the tapes and sales religiously, asking why the fuck I closed at midnight and why the girls were bartending and not me. Tell him what the manager had said and done, and told him that I wouldn't work with manager again. I figured when I did the cash out at midnight, and with the flow we had, it cost the owner about $3,500 in sales, all on the manager. Still friends with the owner and worked at his restaurant for another 2 months before I quit from there too. Had achieved my goal of repaying debts. Story 53. I worked for 3 years at a startup. I trained everyone who walked in the door on how to do the job and brought the company from $1 million a year in revenue to $12 million. I was finally getting the promotion and title I deserved after my predecessor left the company. The CEO, however, saw it as a chance to underpay a 28-year-old kid with no management experience, even though I'd been managing essentially for 3 years. I accepted his terms, took my title, and shopped my resume around. One day I get called into the CEO's office to account for revenue issues. I indicated that I'd tried to bring this to his attention before he promoted me, and he scoffs and launches into an absolute tirade. Little did he know that the very same morning I received a job offer from a very well-established company. Better pay, better benefits, and better perks. I pull my finest dude moment and put my sunglasses on and take out a cigarette and put it to my lips as he's absolutely screaming at me. I look at him across the desk. He can't believe it. His eyes are popping out of his head. He takes a deep breath to scream, and I put my hand up and do my best, Liam Neeson. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to come up with as many questions about your business as you can. I'm then going to give you 60 minutes to ask those questions and listen to my answers. I will not repeat anything, and I will not slow down. When he didn't start writing down questions at first, I reminded him the clock was ticking. At the 59th minute, having half answered arguably the most important question, I took out my lighter and lit the cigarette in his office. Time's up, I stated very nonchalantly. I opened the door and walked past the entire office. People's faces looked as if Agent Smiths were taking over the Matrix. My sales team knew I'd quit immediately and gave me the "Oh, Captain," my captain, on the way out the door. I look back at him standing in his office doorway, and I will never forget the face of someone who realizes in a split moment just how much they've ducked up. I got text messages for weeks from my former reports about how epic it was and how much he was ducking up in my absence. Sweet, sweet justice. Story 54. I managed to find a telemarketing job as one of my first jobs. It sucked and we were treated like animals, but it was close enough that I could walk there from home. I only intended to stay long enough to afford a car. One day, I realized that I'd reached my set dollar amount for a car purchase. As a joke, I strayed as far from the sales pitch as possible. I changed my greeting to things like "Hey" or "Sup." I impersonated celebrity voices. People stopped working around me. They just listened in shock, but it completely backfired. It was my highest day of sales ever. I sold 10 times my average. The pit boss was bewildered, which is why I wasn't fired right away. He listened in on all my calls that day. He begged me to stay, but I was out. Story 55. My first job was at a Fazoli's, quick service Italian place for the uninitiated. Actually, not bad for what it is. I had been there for 2 years and was getting ready to start my freshman year of college when I was told about their employer scholarship program. According to the paperwork I read, I would be given a check amounting to $0.20 for every hour I'd worked up to that point. It wouldn't pay for Harvard, but it's not insubstantial for someone who had been there as long as I had. So I jumped through all of the paperwork hoops, and at the end of the process, I'm told that it would only count the time I had going back 1 year. I'm a little upset, but I figure that's on me for skimming the fine print, and it's still a reasonable chunk of change. The check arrives in the mail one day, and I immediately spent all of it on my books for the semester. I'm kidding because it barely covered a tank of gas. I received a check for $25 on American. When I called corporate about it, they told me that I only qualified for the weeks, which I worked over 35 hours. As a high school student, I'd really only been sticking around so I could get this money, so I figured it was time to move on to greener pastures. I wrote my notice out and posted it on the bulletin board. It's been roughly 2 decades, so I can't remember it verbatim, but it said something approximating this, in increasingly angry handwriting. I am hereby giving 2 weeks' notice. I have enjoyed my time here, but I feel that I have been told a series of half-truths in regards to what should be a major incentive to stay and grow with the company. I mean no ill will to anybody here personally, but I want you to know that I will not only never eat here again, but I will tell everyone I know not to eat here, because I'm one spiteful son of a Karen. Although I do cringe a bit at my martyr complex, I feel I got my point across. For some reason, they told me to go home that night. Story 56. Well, I didn't technically quit my job, but I worked in an electrician company, and every employee worked in pairs with another work partner. Unfortunately, my work partner had an obsession of nitpicking on everything I did while I let him do all his stuff without interfering. This was okay while I was new, but eventually I noticed he also had some minor flaws here and there when doing his work, so he was far from perfect himself. The flaws on our work were never anything dangerous, but mostly cosmetic. But when he acted as he apparently never had any flaws compared to me, and started acting superior over me, even though we were supposed to be on equal footing, I one day had enough and went to my boss to address my partner's personality and that I couldn't stand working with someone who treated me like low-life scum compared to himself. My partner was always a nice guy while we were at the office, but turned into a banana when we were out on a mission. So my boss never understood my complaints. The third time I complained to the boss about this, he told me I had to change my attitude and be more of a buddy with him. But the fact of the matter is, I am actually a really nice guy and had tried to be nice with this guy all the time, so we could be friends and I could enjoy working. I suppose my face changed quite a bit when he told me that, and I noticed myself getting quite furious inside. I told my boss very strictly that there was no way I would work with this guy anymore, and I would rather be unemployed than working with someone who is a hole. So unless he fired me along with a letter stating this, I would make him fire me. He had his choices, and I left the office 20 minutes later without a job and a paper saying I had been taken out of my position due to lack of available work for the business. The reason I didn't quit was because you get social support if you lose your job, but won't get it if you quit on your own. Sleeping a few hours extra the next day felt really good, and just 2 weeks later, I got myself the same job I have today, 4 years later, and couldn't have been happier. Story 57. I was working for an engineering company, serving the oil and gas industry as a project manager. This was in the years following the 2008 crash, so I couldn't be too picky if I wanted to keep working. I'd always worked for legitimate firms up to this point, so when the office was raided by the Texas Rangers, not the baseball team, I was quite surprised. Turns out there were allegations of public bid rigging, narcotics trafficking, fraud, and theft made against the owners. The actual engineering work was merely a cover for the crime. The owners stepped aside, and the office manager and others, related to the owners who weren't caught up in the mess, took over operations while the law enforcement agencies completed the investigation. At this time, it was very difficult to get a job in the engineering business, as all of us employed there found out. The choice was continue working there or be unemployed. I resolved to find a new job and spread the word to my family. My brother suggested I get a job with a railroad, which was pretty easy to do in his location, but not easy at all where I live. Still, I persisted, and after 4 attempts, I was invited to a hiring session. The hiring process was long, as the company narrowed down the near 1,000 applicants to 14 of us who were to be hired. 3 months after I applied, I got the email with my final offer of employment. This was in the middle of the work week, about 10 in the morning, and the office was very busy and noisy with various phone calls and meetings. I sat back in my chair and breathed an audible sigh of relief. I pulled my office keys from my keyring and placed them on my desk and closed my laptop. As I stood up, the others around me stopped their conversations and their work and looked at me puzzled as I strolled toward the door past the office manager, the VPs, and the owners. I shook a colleague's hand on the way out, and with my back turned to the owners, I said, "Good luck," and that was it. I never looked back, and I have never regretted it. I worked for a crappy company that got caught in illegal stuff. I walked off the job in front of the entire staff. Story 58. I didn't quit, but I was laid off. So, about 2 years ago, I had been working at a big biotech company in manufacturing. I won't lie, I hated my life and hated my job. It was boring and repetitive. Some of my coworkers were just plain horrible, mean, refused to try new things that would undoubtedly make our job faster, and whiny. Then they were going to do layoffs. I was excited. They first offered packages to people who were close to retirement or had been with the company for over 10 years. My friend who had just transferred took hers because, well, it saved someone else's job who needed it more, and she wanted to move out of California. After all of those were handed out and either rejected or declined, they started looking for people in departments who still had to be cut. Luckily, I knew someone in AR, so I had her put me in towards the top of the pile for my department. Then, as some see it, Black Tuesday came. For me, it was the best Tuesday ever. The director for our department called me into a conference room. Along with the director was an HR rep. He said, "Unfortunately, I was getting laid off." I started smiling so big, he looked at me like I was crazy. When he asked why I was smiling, I was able to tell him my dirty little secret. I was unhappy at my job, and I was actually leaving for a 5-month military training course. I am in the reserves. So he was like, "Oh," and the HR rep was like, "Well, okay then." So they got to go over my layoff package with me, and everyone was so relieved. I got basically 2 months paid vacation and another month paid while I was on active duty, along with the annual bonus that everyone gets. I actually found a job just before I left for my military duty in Las Vegas, and they held it for me until I got back. I moved to Las Vegas with about $20K, got a nice apartment, great job, and haven't looked back since. Story 59. I was witness to a classic quit job. Was at a local pizza place with my family. It was around 6-ish, and the place was packed with families and other patrons, mainly HS kids, for the dinner rush. All of a sudden, this kid comes running out from behind the counter where you get your food. He whips off his shirt and shorts and jumps on a table in front of a packed restaurant and exclaims very loudly, "I'm quitting because the manager that runs this place is a total a-hole and won't give me a day off. Oh yeah, I pissed in the pizza sauce too. Thank you. Have a good night," and grabbed his clothes, dismounted, and then ran out the door. It was dead quiet for about 5 minutes. Then the manager came out and apologized, and 10 minutes later, people went back to their meals. Still remember that like it happened yesterday. Story 60. It was the early 1990s, and I worked for a telemarketing company with the initials SMC in Logan, UT. I was employed for 2 full days when I came to the conclusion that we were just scamming old people out of their money using grossly unethical methods. I quit after my second day of work, and when I received my paycheck, I noticed that I was paid minimum wage instead of the $10 per hour I was promised when they hired me, so I went back to complain. The office manager told me, "You didn't finish the 90-day probationary period, so you only get minimum wage." Bullcrap. They never said anything about a probationary period in training, and I know it wasn't in the contract I signed upon hire. Yeah, I actually read it before signing it. As the office manager opened the door to have me leave, he said, "See ya, wouldn't want to be ya." I was fuming. I called the city offices and discovered that SMC didn't have a business license and reported them. Less than an hour later, I watched as the police showed up and told them they would have to shut down operations until they had a business license. It took them 2 weeks. When they were back in business, I used an elaborate scheme to get myself on their call list and recorded several of their employees' efforts to sell me their crap. It was Utah and legal to record the calls. I knew what they were doing wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Not only did I report it to a local news station who had their consumer reporter, Debbie Dujanovic, do a 2-part story on the scummy company, but I also reported them to the FBI. The owner of the company was one of the 200-plus people that was arrested by the FBI in a nationwide sting of dishonest telemarketing companies. The FBI called it Operation Disconnect. See, you wouldn't want to be ya. Ha! Story 61. I worked at a car wash in high school. One day, the car wash was shut down for repair, so that whole day we sat at the entrance to the parking lot and gave out a coupon for a free wash as a sorry for the inconvenience. The guy who I was working with, who was one of my good friends, decided to take a couple for his family's cars. A week later, I remember 2 police cars showing up, and they brought him in the office and accused him of theft of the free wash passes. I was extremely mad and wanted to freak out, but I waited for the police to leave. My friend was not arrested, just cited and given a court date and escorted off the property. When the police left, the area directors and CEO were standing around laughing about how they showed him. So I lost it. I walked up to their little group and said, "What the duck is so funny?" And the looked at me like I just stepped on a puppy. The CEO said, "Excuse me?" in the most offended tone you will ever hear. So I remember looking down and wondering if losing my job was worth it. I decided it was. Now the CEO went to the same church as me, so I asked him if he's going to church this Sunday, and he said yes in a very confused tone. So I just looked up at him and said, "Well, you shouldn't be because pieces of crap typically don't go to church." The look on his face was priceless. And before he could tell me I was fired, I blurted out that I quit. I threw my crap down and never looked back at them, gave the guys spraying the cars a high five on the way out, walked out to the parking lot where I heard them yell that my uniform was their property. I stripped down, I always wore basketball shorts under my uniform pants, and left it at that. Story 62. I worked for a used car dealership briefly as a salesman. Duck car sales, by the way. I was moving to a new city with my girlfriend, now wife, when she went to grad school. So I had a definite end date in July. I was living with my parents, so I didn't have many expenses. I asked for a Saturday off to go to my wife's brother's wedding. They informed me that we weren't allowed to take Saturdays off. A few days later, I'd sold a car, but there was a delay that was not my fault. My mother and I were supposed to get lunch together. I asked if I could go and have someone else close the sale. My manager informed me that if I did, that person would get paid for it. I spent over 2 hours standing around with my proverbial banana in my hand while my mother waited at a Ruby Tuesday for me. Then, a few days before my brother-in-law's wedding, I saw someone put in his 2 weeks notice. The manager looked him up and down and said, "Nah, you're done now." So what do I know? There are holes who don't respect me, and if I try to give them customary notice, they'll crap can me. So duck it. I decide to go to the wedding. It's 8:30 on a Saturday morning, and my shift is supposed to start at 9 o'clock. I call my manager. "Yeah, Craig, I won't be in today." "What? You have to come in." No. I actually quit. And then I went to the wedding and had a wonderful time. It wasn't hilarious, I guess, but deeply satisfying. Story 63. Long ago, like mid-80s long ago, I worked at a Carl's Jr. I worked the delivery shifts 2 days a week before school, and then weekends or whatever. So one Friday morning, the truck shows up, and the new manager screwed up the fry order. Instead of the normal 15 cases of fries to get us through the weekend, she ordered 150 cases of fries. I protested to the delivery driver, and his attitude was, "Duck you, I'm putting these pallets of fries here. Do what you want with them." Of course, the new manager wasn't in and couldn't be reached at home. This was a time before cell phones existed. So I bust my ass and rearrange our entire deep freezer and managed to stack 150 cases of fries in the freezer. I had to unbox a bunch of them so I could stack the bags in any open space available, including a huge stack right at the door. So the manager finally gets in at 7:45, right before I'm about to head to school, and I explain the situation to her, and she starts losing her crap, yelling at me, yelling at the shift supervisor, and demands to see all the fries. I told her to be careful. There were a ton of bags stacked up while she's stomping through the walk-in to get to the freezer in the back. Mind you, the whole time she's yelling about how I ducked up, how I should have taken control, yada yada yada. She rushed the freezer door, yanked it open, and was buried under 150 clumps of fry bags. If I thought she was mad before, boy, howdy. So I help her up and she goes completely bat-crap insane, and finally ends her tirade with her arms akimbo and demands to know what I'm going to do to fix this problem. At this point, I took my nifty visor off, put it on her head, took off my apron and hung it over her forearm and turned around and walked out. Story 64. This isn't an official job, but whatever. When I was a young teen, my mom took up one of those door-to-door magazine order jobs where you basically hand out one magazine to each house, and 7 days later, the magazine should be put back in the mailbox. For collection with an order form, you give the order form to the order department, and they ship out the product to the house. Basically, you leave the magazine. 1 week later, you collect the magazine, and then you move on to the next street. I was really happy my mom got this job, as she hadn't worked for about a year, and my dad was doing 50-plus hours a week to keep things afloat. First day comes. She tells me to get in the car. I'm coming with her. Turns out she wanted to just follow me in the car as I delivered all the magazines on foot. I had to walk 2+ miles every day. This was summer, so about 100 F weather, since there was a different neighborhood each day. She also didn't pay me, and I had to endure crazy old people every day yelling at me for stealing their mail when I collected the remaining magazine. I did this for about a month, essentially doing her $300 a week job, and she didn't even reimburse me anything, before finding out that several of the streets actually had registered sex offenders on them. So the next day, she drove me to the first street, and I got out the car with as many magazines as I could carry, probably about 30, and ran for my dear ducking life, throwing a magazine in a random direction every few houses, and ran home. Luckily, the street was only a 5-minute or so walk from my house, leaving her to find and pick up all the magazines, deliver them all, and drive home. The next day, she didn't ask me to deliver any, and the day after that, she quit. Story 65. I worked at a video store this past year. At the beginning of summer, my store got a new manager, which really sucked for me because me and my old manager had become good friends. Anyway, this new manager was complete ass at her job. It didn't help that we were understaffed. She had me working 40-hour weeks. The shifts were short too, so I would have to come in every single day. Keep in mind this is summertime and I'm not able to do anything but work. We had basic assignments for opening the store and closing. The manager always opened and I always closed. However, each shift has a certain list of responsibilities that have to get done, or else the district manager would get on your banana. My manager left me with her work every single shift I went in. Eventually, I got sick of working and decided I was going to quit. So I went in acting like I was about to take her shift. As she was leaving, I beat her to the door and simply told her, I quit. Probably not the most badass example in this thread, but it was a big deal for me. For Story 66. I was working for Sam's Club right out of high school as a cashier. I was always in the top 3 for accuracy and speed. I had been wanting to move out to center section. The front-end manager would ask me to help train a couple of new cashiers, then I could move. When I would get done with training, then something else will come up for a reason I couldn't go. I got fed up with it and waited until the busiest Sunday in the store's history and quit right after my lunch break. Just handed my best and till keys to her and said I quit. Bye. Story 67. I seen shoplifting at Sears yesterday. When I left there, I hid the 250-300 business cards I had left in freezers taped to the back of TVs, up inside the ceiling. Story 68. Back in 2005, I sold Saturn cars and had a crap boss who constantly said, if you don't do this, you won't have a job anymore. Well, she demanded that we went to a training class for 3 days, which meant 3 days of no selling. And during a busy season, you can make 1,000 easy by sheer volume. I asked if it was going to be paid, which she said yes, of course. Well, 250 per day guarantee was okay, considering. So we all went with it. We come back and have a meeting where she says, hey guys, I know I said it was going to be paid, but it's not, sorry. I said to her, you are going to pay us because you said it and it's a loss of income for us all. Her reply was, "Tough. If you don't like it, you can quit." I said, "Fine, I quit. And your stupid Karen ass is going to enjoy dealing with the labor board, plus owing us travel time and gas compensation." I walked down the street and got a job the same day working for Mazda Kia. I filed a report against her with the labor board, and they contacted me asking if anyone else had been affected, which I told them about. 10 others were forced to go to the training. Within 2 weeks, I received a check for about $1,100, and as I felt amazing by getting the money I was owed, she walks into the same dealership I now worked at and was applying for a sales manager position. I told the management there she was the reason I had quit and what she had done. She wasn't hired. Story 69. I used to work as a video rental cashier jockey. They made me de facto store manager while they hired a new one. Didn't give me authority to hire people or make schedules or do anything really. And took so long to find a new store manager, the store basically fell apart. And then because I was responsible, even though I had no authority to do anything, they passed me over for a promotion to actual assistant manager. The person they offered it to told me about it and said, "I bet you're gonna quit when I tell you this." "You're damned right I'm going to." "Good, because I just quit too," she said. Every one of our employees was in the store at some point that day, and I told them I was quitting, and they all had the same reaction. "Really? Me too." So we all came back in that night and put in a call to the district manager. Phone call went like this. "Hey, you found a new store manager yet?" "No?" "Well, you have 2 weeks. I quit." "Wait, hold on. Someone else wants to talk to." "Hey, I quit too." "Hang on. Someone else wants to say something." And it just went around every employee that way. We all quit over the phone at one time. DM didn't know what to say. Story 70. Worked for a difficult attorney for 10 years. For most of that time, we got along very well, to the point that the other admins were like, "How do you do it?" Had a big falling out BC. He said I slighted his wife once on a random visit she made to the office while he was out. It did not go down like that at all. It took me 2 years to find another good paying job, but during that time, I still worked all the OT I could get. Single mom, etc. The one Sunday, I worked 13 hours to meet a deadline for a major client. While there, my daughter called to tell me a job I had interviewed for had called, and I got it. Monday morning when I came in, he called me into his office to thank me for working all day Sunday, and I said, "Thanks, but I am leaving." Priceless. People who quit their jobs dramatically. What happened next? Story 1. I had requested 2 weeks off in June to move my mom from Indiana to Virginia in October. It was approved in June by email. The time came to get someone up to speed 2 weeks before I left at the beginning of October. My VP informed me that I could have a Thursday and Friday off and return that Monday instead of the original 2 weeks. Let's just say things got heated. At that point, I had mentally given a silent 2 weeks notice. I made sure all personal effects were out of my office. All commitments to my colleagues were met before the next paycheck hit. Once the paycheck hit, I knew they couldn't pull it back because it would affect everyone in the batch. I worked 6:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. due to my commute. 3:31 p.m. I was in my car heading home. I left my computer set up with a simple password on a piece of paper in a manila envelope that contained my access card, company credit card, and my hotspot. I blocked all company phone numbers and proceeded out the door. The next day, the office used my emergency contacts to find out what happened to me. My family simply said I went to help my mom. A meeting was held to determine who handled what workload in our department. Each item he asked about one of the 9 people in the room said Blue XTC each time. By the time he hit the 9th item, he commented that perhaps I was overworked, as I had repeatedly said. My bestie was in the room and Dolores had no filter. Her immediate response was, "You think?" No one had ever quit like that with him before. 6 years later, it is still referred to as doing the Blue XTC. Karma did get him last year for all the PTSD he had given people. He was a retired Marine major who forgot the Marine credo. A showdown between himself and another VP ended when he gave the owner an ultimatum as to who would take over company operations when the owner retired. Let's just say he retired before the owner did. Story 2. I walked out of a crisis center group home for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities at 2 a.m. They tricked me into working there. Didn't tell me it was a crisis center until my first day. Super understaffed and super dangerous. Finally walked out when the dude who smears crap all over himself and walks around naked attacked me, and we wound up having to put him in a hold for 2 hours. After 1 hour, I made up my mind that the instant this dude got up, calmed down, and went to his room that I was leaving. So I did. He calmed down and went to his room. I then went into the office, grabbed all my crap, said I was going out to cool off because I was hot. I really was. And then hopped in my car and took off. Called my wife to tell her to unlatch the door. I blocked every single number associated with that place, so I never heard from them. I got a text from an unknown number the next day, but it was a very long text, so I didn't even bother to read one word of it before deleting blocking. I also had been keeping track of all dangerous situations and had been reporting them to HR as they happened. had a friend in HR who told me to text her the moment anything happened. And once I left, I also reported them to the health department for how they cooked and stored food. Crap smearer and others who had no concept of hygiene were always touching foodstuffs and getting into the fridge. I refused to eat any food from there. As such, heads rolled. Lots of people got fired. Not sure of the details, but duck 'em. They called me a snitch constantly because they knew I was messaging HR, and it got to the point where they'd only call me snitch instead of my name, so I made them lose their job. Story 3. I was working on a play that kept getting extended. They had to close for 2 weeks because another show had been booked in there like a year prior. They kept me on because I was a sound guy who knew the room. They decided to use the same gear to save time on load in and out. I kept working for those 2 weeks. It was just an easier option all around. The actor in the show was an absolute a-hole. He would spend rehearsals berating me because he didn't like his headset mic that he brought with him. Producer asked me for a recommendation on something smaller, and I gave it. I told them they need to buy 3 so we'd have 2 backups. They said no. Mike broke at preview, like physically broke, because his dresser was rough with a costume change. Actor stops the show, tells me from the stage he needs to talk to me backstage now. I walk back there and he lays into me about the mic breaking. I shout back that if they bought more than one like I asked, we could fix it in 2 minutes. And now he has to use the mic he hates. He yelled that I was a ducking idiot, and I stopped yelling. I said, "Have a good run with your crafty show and lose my number." I walked over to the stage manager and said, "I'm leaving. Good luck." He said, "Yup, totally understand." I then had a 2-week vacation and came back to the original show. It was a small production and we all went to lunch on 2 show days, and they had me tell the story over lunch for the next 2 weeks. Show does not get good reviews and never went anywhere else. My production went to Broadway. I didn't work that leg. Wasn't in Yahtzee at the time. Story 4. It was July when I was pushing for my contact to be renewed so I could deny their offer as I had a new job starting in September. I asked every week for a contract as my current ended August 31st. My final shift was August 28th, Sunday overnight into 0600 Monday morning. I took everything of mine from my desk and locked cabinet. My own keyboard I bought for work, my mouse pad, my second monitor. From my cabinet, I took all my papers, paper clips, pens, and etc. This desk was a tower connected to a monitor. My cabinet unlocked with my keys taped to the inside of the top drawer. I didn't answer any emails, and when it was my next regular scheduled shift, I emailed my boss. I have yet to receive a job offer to continue my career at X. I will not be accepting another contract from X due to how disgusting I feel that you've treated me these last 2 months, never offering me a contact extension. I wish you all the best. This email is best to send the exit interview questionnaire. Sincerely, me. They never replied, but I got all 5 managers and HR auto-reply emails that they opened it. I feel proud of how I left that crap hole of a job. How do you not give a contract extension to someone working 3 years at your company and expect them to work again without a contract signed and submitted when I gave 2 months notice every week until I left? New job was significantly better and a career booster. Didn't have middle management like an office space. Story 5. I quit a job at a beer and pizza place because of too much drama. I got a job at a fine dining steak place. Went through their training, learned about their wines, made flashcards to study for the ingredient test, etc. Found out it would be years before I'd be allowed work on the more lucrative dinner shift. And if you can't upsell, you will never make it to the dinner shift. Lunch shift would be $2.13 in hour and average $50 in tips and only around 3 to 4 hour shifts. Most servers had 2 jobs. I found this out because a coworker at the fine dining place asked for a ride home because he didn't have a car. Everyone at the causal place could afford a car. The grass isn't always greener. Asked for my old job back. Got it. Stayed on for another year or so. Then went into healthcare. Story 6. Last March, I yelled at the CEO and CFO about fried chicken. It was about more than fried chicken, but a short-sighted decision to try and make a quick buck instead of staying true to our community-minded values was the last straw. I was already mentally hanging on by a thread, and this was the last in a series of big surprises that were suspiciously absent from weekly meetings, specifically to talk about these types of business decisions. I was sent home, was given a severance, and asked to resign. It absolutely gutted me as I had literally worked my way up from the bottom to a senior leadership role and thought it was my forever career. Seeing it from the outside now, I'm glad I was forced out. I wouldn't have left on my own, but the environment and role was causing so much stress to myself and my family that it was making me physically sick. I now work with people that value my feedback. They speak my language and I can share ideas and challenge others without feeling like I'm stepping out of line. It's not perfect, but I'm also not awake for 2 hours in the middle of the night thinking about work. And I'm not working 60-hour weeks. As for my former employer and the fried chicken, They recorded a 2 mil sales loss this past year, for the first time in decades, while all other retailers within the system showed big gains. Their stores now smell like rancid cooking oil, and they had to delay a major renovations because of the loss in sales. Story 7, Ima B. So far. One of my team leads was being incredibly rude towards me for being a younger staff member, even though I quite literally had 2 years worth of seniority. And when I went to complain to my manager that the new team lead was being overly aggressive and not permitting possibly the most qualified person to operate their machinery, he simply responded with, "Well, you are only a crew member." After he said that, I looked him dead in the eyes, said, "I have been here for 4.5 years. She has never worked at business name." He cut me off and said I was being insubordinate towards more qualified staff. She had never worked in that position before. She only got a team lead position because she was friends with HR. So after turning red in the face from that blatant insult, I went to the bathroom, changed out of my uniform, walked back into the manager's office, threw my uniform on the desk, I made sure to knock over his pen container, and stormed out. When the more qualified staff lead asked where I was going, I flipped her off, said, "Duck you, Karen," and walked out, slammed the door behind me too. When I got home, all of my coworkers that I was friendly with had texted me saying I was awesome for doing that. After I left, turns out that she ended up getting fired a week later for tampering with one of the machines so that she didn't have to clean it. Never going back. Ever. She got what she deserved. Story 8. Stormed out of a meeting where basically my boss, directors, needed me to throw a lot of my colleagues under the bus and betray their trust. Resigned, and handed in my 2 months the next Monday. Long story, won't go into it. I had plans to start my own company with a friend and bring a few clients with me. Perfect excuse to follow up on it. Succeeded with a couple of big contracts and big brand names, felt good. Marketing, PR, agency world, so there's no real capital to invest beyond office address, website, business reg, email stuff, etc. Old company kept it diplomatic and would refer me some business sometimes, which I do and charge a bit higher because easy money. In the end though, once the initial burst of prove them all wrong motivation faded, it became too tough. Starting a business with a few leads ready is easy. Growing one over years is much harder. Also, as I got older, the financial anxiety, uncertainty became too much. Lonely, too. Now back to the full-time world and making a comfortable salary, wiser and calmer. A Duck UI1 story would have been nice, but I was never a real long-term threat to them. Still, I didn't lose either. Got to be a boss in my 20s, met my wife, a past client, used my experience to land me better jobs now, didn't fully burn the bridge, and am still friends with some ex-colleagues, etc. Story 9. Had a company that never accepted 2 weeks. I got a new job paying almost double, but required me to move. I had a playback followed by a retrospective on Friday. I showed off my deliverable during last in the playback. At the end, I said that was the last thing I'd be showing and thanked everyone for their support. Everyone was shocked. The big boss spoke up and asked why I wasn't giving notice. I simply said, I'm aware that in the past, when employees gave notice, they were immediately terminated. The boss then immediately closed the playback. I went and did the retrospective with the team and said goodbye. And it was like 3 p.m. at that point, so I went and turned my stuff into my boss and did a quick exit interview. My boss definitely got it. I do believe that they implemented a mandatory 2 weeks notice with a mandatory 2 weeks, they'd pay you at that point. Of course, they can't force you to give notice, but they were also promising the pay whether they had you come in or not. Wasn't worried about burning a bridge because I was moving and never coming back. Story 10, nothing for me. I think they realized they didn't have a leg to stand on. They were already harassing me as it was, then asked me to come in on my day off to help. The other person I was supposed to help throw it all on me and just went off for 3 hours talking and didn't lift a finger to help. Apparently after I'd cleaned an area, it got messed up again after I'd left. The manager full-on yelled at me in front of people about how I suck at my job, and it shows how I suck at things at home too, making it personal. So I walked out, called my wife and told her I'm quitting. Walked back in, straight to their office, and just sat my keys down in front of her and said, I'm quitting. I'm no longer taking this kind of verbal abuse from you and the staff. She replied, I really thought you a better person than you really had me fooled. So I replied, well then that makes 2 of us, and walked out to the shocked look on her face. Nothing ever came of it. In fact, I got a job that has to go by there, ironically, and she just kind of turned her nose up at me, then proceeded to ignore me. Story 11, rejoined a company, steel laser cutting. I worked in sales for 4 years, about 8 years later, under new ownership as the joint general manager. But the new MD trusted the existing general manager more than me, and found out she was previously an admin assistant. For about 3 months prior to the new ownership, only one of the existing staff from my time was there still first week realized none of the sales staff knew how to price a job. The guy I used to work with who knew everything about operating machines was basically ignored. and we held no stock of materials, so every job was costly. I told them after 2 weeks they need to make serious changes and was ignored, and then they brought in a consultant who made even worse decisions, and I quit after 3 weeks. Company went bust about 12 months later. Saw the MD in a shop who took me on about 2 years later, and she said she should have listened to me and not the other GM, wished me well and said keep in touch. Started my own cosmetics manufacturing business straight after, and grew that to $1.8 million before exiting. Went into that job thinking I didn't know enough. Turns out I probably did. Now commercial director of a cosmetics manufacturer doing 3.5 running the place. Essentially, story 12. This was about 6 years ago when the symptoms of schizophrenia were popping up for me. Was having problems with a coworker, real or imagined, I can't say at this point. About 2 weeks prior to quitting, I had challenged him to a fight. We didn't, and I apologized. The day I quit, it was lunchtime. I had taken my gloves off and put them somewhere. After eating, I went to get my gloves, forgetting where I put them, and accused others of messing with my crap. I'd also had a check stolen out of my locker at this point, so I assumed I was being targeted. I exploded, yelling at my boss, confronting a different coworker than the one I tried to fight and quite liked, and quit. On my way out, I was yelling more, swearing and all that. Got to the door, my boss shook my hand, and that was that. About a week later, the operations manager calls to see what happened. I told him he said it was unfortunate and said I could use him as a reference. Went through 15 jobs in a year after that and have been on disability since. Story 13. I'd been there 25 years and had worked my way up to the most senior operational, not managerial role. When they pissed me the F off by doing some unethical crap, I felt bad for some people who I knew I had left in the lurch by walking out, so I was hesitant to reach out. But I'd done good work for enough people that within a month, both former colleagues and former customers were reaching out to me for project and training gig opportunities. I did that for 3 years and was able to support myself with about half-time work until one of them offered me a full-time job that took me the rest of the way to retirement. In hindsight, the years I was on my own, not working crazy hours, were among the most important in my kids' lives as they were finishing school and moving out on their own and lots of milestones. It was great to not be so busy and miss those moments. I guess you gotta know your worth. Story 14. I was a server, and usually the way you're let off is first in, first out. I was one of the better servers, so I got the premium in between lunch, dinner shift, so I was always the first in. This one day, our manager's best friend decided he was gonna throw a fit about being last in, last out, so the manager switched us. This was right at the start of the dinner rush. I had a whole bunch of crap to do the next morning and couldn't be there until 1 a.m. Told the manager. He said he'd get me next time. Warned him that if he did this, I was out. I currently had 7 tables. He said his decision stood. I bounced. Next day, I got a job at a better restaurant, making nearly double. Story 15. First quarterly bonus comes around. I'm told my target was 75% of what I had originally been told. But congratulations, I'm getting 110% of target. I resigned on the spot and said I'd put in 2 weeks out of respect, but that I was straight up lied to. I go back to my desk only to find that my login has been deactivated. My skip-level director walks over as I'm packing up the handful of personal things on my desk and offers me a promotion to 2 levels above my then current role. This would have more than compensated, but it left such a bad taste in my mouth that I said no and walked out. Ended up being a very, very good decision. This was at the end of 2007. Said company found itself in serious trouble a few months later and needed a multi-billion-dollar bailout. My entire division got laid off. I had already found a much better job. Story 16. Went home. Girlfriend came home. I relayed the story of what had happened and why I'd walked. She got all panicky. What are we gonna do? How are we gonna pay the mortgage? Where we will get money from? What if you can't get another job? In the middle of this, I took a phone call. It was a superior job offer at a more prestigious workplace who'd caught wind of the fact that I'd left from a mutual acquaintance. Literally had a new job, unprompted, a few hours after walking from one without doing anything whatsoever. Within weeks, the entire senior management at my previous place were sacked, several banned from the industry. The place was investigated for several instances of fraud and failure to meet required legal standards. And within months, not one single member of staff from when I worked there was still working there. Story 17. 15 years, some mean bosses. If I got a bad one, I knew I just needed to survive them for about a year and I'd have another. Commute was 2 hours each way. Part-time job, just driving into work every day. Scene became toxic. Junior guy that I helped get up to speed and solve after-hour issues ended up being praised and got promoted. When I asked my current manager about me, he said, "We're looking into it." Took all my vacation and put in my 2 weeks the day I came back. This was the same time our VP went overseas and was unreachable to make sure they didn't try to offer me anything to stay. Took the summer off and ended up finding a local job only 30 minutes away, getting paid double my salary. Never looked back, and I'm in a better place because of it. Story 18. Not me, but A woman at work constantly made a big deal about her new job as soon as she put her notice in. How much better the company was, hinting at the pay being great, being finally recognized for her efforts, etc., etc., etc. Then pretty much immediately stopped doing any work. She was fairly sly about it. She would move around a lot, but it was so obvious. She would get called out for it and eventually by a big boss, which turned into a fairly dramatic scene about how she was glad to be finally free of this place and how underappreciated she was. Then, the last week of her notice, she was suddenly very quiet and actually did some work. My boss told me this new job never materialized and she asked to stay. Unfortunately for her, they had already hired someone else, story 19, full-time job, less than 2 hours. I'm a tiny nonprofit company that did sports classes, afternoon care, and holiday programs for children. Boss called me to his office to discuss my slacking work ethic, aka diagnosed burnout. I gave him my notice right there, walked out, and called in sick the next day. Never went back. 8 of the 20 colleagues quit right after I did. They were sick of this ducker. The company has been on the verge of collapse since then. Terminated some contracts because they didn't have enough employees and lost some more after the contractors found out how horrible the company was to its own workers. I hope the boss loses everything he built up in his life. Story 20. After being in an exceptionally toxic work environment where I was overworked and treated like absolute crap, I rage quit. The only reason I worked one extra day was because the next day had an event for big brothers/big sisters, and I didn't want to screw over the kids. As a result of me quitting, they had to hire 1 fritted and 2 PT people to replace me. Plus, they had to cancel one of their most popular events because I wasn't there to do all the work and physically be there. This all happened within 2 weeks of me returning from stress leave, where they had to cancel their other most popular event because of the same reason.